If you're an empath, you have probably attracted at least one narcissist into your life, maybe more than one. I know I have. And if you've spent any time in spiritual spaces, you have probably heard the explanation that goes something like, you attracted them because of your wounds, because of your unhealed patterns, because somewhere inside you believed that you didn't deserve better. And while there may be some truth to that, I want to offer you something more complete today, because that explanation, while not wrong, puts all the weight on the empath. And it misses something essential about why this dynamic exists, the higher perspective about it, what it's actually doing, and why right now, in this specific moment in time, so many people are moving through it simultaneously. This is not just your personal lesson. This is actually a collective one. And understanding that changes everything about how you hold that. So let's go deep today. I've got another channeled message for you. Welcome to my channel. If you don't know me, I'm Heather, the owner of Divine Ascension Company, and I like to give these little channeled messages to all of my followers because it helps us understand a little bit about what's going on in the world from a higher vantage point. So today I'm going to cover the energetic mechanics of this relationship dynamic, the soul contract piece, what gaslighting is actually doing underneath the surface, why your awakening is the thing that's going to break that pattern for good, and what the higher dimensions are saying about why this surfacing is so broad right now and going on for so many people. I've been seeing it everywhere. So stay with me because this one is very important. Now let's start at the beginning, at the frequency level. Empaths carry a specific gift that most people don't fully understand, including, often, the empath themselves. You can feel into people, not just their surface presentation, but the version of themselves that they show the world. But you can also see underneath that, the potential, the soul beneath their wounds, the person they could be if they weren't so afraid, so armored, so disconnected from themselves. You look at someone and you see what they're capable of, and you love that, genuinely. And that's not being naive. It's actually a real gift. Now, a person who is operating from a narcissistic pattern, and I want to be very clear here, I'm talking about the pattern, not labeling any individual as a diagnosis. That person has a very specific wound at their core. At the center of the narcissistic wound is a disconnection from self. They cannot accurately perceive their own worth. They have built an entire identity structure around compensating for that gap, through control, through validation seeking, through making other people's reality smaller so their own feels bigger. And they are desperately, chronically in need of a mirror that shows them as worthy. So in walks the empath, and you see their potential. You love what you see underneath, and you reflect back to them a version of themselves that they have never been able to access on their own. And for a while, that feels like love for both of you. For you, it feels like connection, like truly being seen, like finding someone whose depth matches yours. And for them, it feels like finally being recognized, finally being enough. The problem is that the dynamic was never equal. You were providing something that they could not reciprocate. Because to truly see another person, you have to be able to see yourself first. And that is the one thing that they cannot do. So the dynamic starts to shift, usually slowly. The mirroring that felt like love begins to require more and more of you. You start adjusting yourself to keep the reflection steady, walking on eggshells, monitoring their mood, shrinking the parts of you that seem to threaten that equilibrium. And you do this, I want to say this carefully, not because you are weak, but because you are wired for attunement. Reading the emotional field of the people around you and adjusting accordingly is literally how your nervous system is built. And in a healthy relationship, that gift creates profound intimacy. But in this dynamic, it gets weaponized. Let's talk about gaslighting, because I think most people understand what it looks like. The denial, the rewriting of history, the that never happened and you're being too sensitive, and many other things. But fewer people understand what it's actually targeting underneath. Because gaslighting is not primarily about controlling the facts of a situation. It's about eroding your relationship with your own perception. Let's think about that for a moment. If I can make you doubt what you saw, what you heard, what you felt, if I can make you consistently reach for my version of reality over your own, then I have effectively removed your ability to navigate independently. And now you become dependent on my interpretation of events, which means I control the story, which means I control the dynamic. That's the mechanism. And it's not accidental. And it works specifically on empaths because your natural tendency is to consider other perspectives, to ask yourself, well, am I being too sensitive? To give the benefit of the doubt, to believe the best about people. And those are beautiful qualities. And in this dynamic, they become the entry point. Over time, and this is the part that stays with people long after these relationships end, the gaslighting installs a habit. Then you start doing it to yourself, filtering your own experience through the question, but am I sure? Reaching for external confirmation before you trust your internal knowing. Second guessing what you feel before you've even finished feeling it. The relationship ends. The gaslighting continues internally, and that is one of the most insidious pieces of this dynamic and the one that gets talked about the least. So if you're in this right now, or coming out of it, and you notice that you still don't fully trust yourself, that you still hesitate before asserting your own experience, that's not a character flaw. That is a pattern that was deliberately installed. And patterns can be uninstalled, but you have to see them first. Now here's where it gets interesting, and this is the piece that I think explains why so many people are moving through this simultaneously right now. We are in a period of a collective awakening. I know that phrase gets used a lot and can start to feel abstract, so let me make it a little more concrete. What awakening means at the practical level is that perception is sharpening. The veil between what is real and what is performance is thinning. Things that used to feel subtle, energetic incongruences, when someone's words and their energy don't match, when something is off even though you can't name it yet, those are becoming harder to ignore. Your body knows before your mind does. That is always true for empaths, and right now it's being amplified. You feel something is wrong before you can really articulate why. You know what you experienced even when you're being told that you didn't. The mechanisms that used to keep you doubting yourself, the gaslighting, the deflection, the subtle reality distortion, those are starting to feel different, more obvious, and less effective. This is your gift coming fully online. The same way that sensitivity made you vulnerable to this dynamic in the first place, the ability to feel what's real underneath what's presented, is now the thing that's showing you the truth. Not eventually, not after enough evidence, but now in real time. And here's the spiritual layer. What we are really seeing through is the illusion of separation. The narcissistic dynamic runs on a particular illusion, that one person's reality can be made more stable by controlling another person's. That love is a resource to be managed rather than a field to participate in. That connection requires hierarchy. As our consciousness expands, those illusions become unsustainable. Not because they weren't always false, because they were, but because more and more people are operating at a frequency where that falseness is simply visible, and you can't unsee it once you see it. And that's what's happening collectively. Millions of people simultaneously having their perception clarified, seeing through dynamics they had been in for years, sometimes decades, feeling the ground shift underneath relationship structures that were built on distorted foundations. It's uncomfortable. It's disorienting. And it also exactly is what is supposed to be happening. And I want to take this one step further, because if you remember that as within, so without, these dynamics are the same thing that we're witnessing, that we're seeing through the illusions of our reality with everything that's happening in our outside world. Whether that's the government, education, the medical field, all of these illusions that we've been part of, that we're now starting to see through, this narcissist relationship dynamic is just that personal level of the same thing that is happening at a global scale. Next, I want to spend a moment on the soul contract piece because it comes up a lot in my sessions and I think it's important to hold carefully. From a soul perspective, we do not enter into these difficult dynamics by accident. There are agreements at a level beyond our conscious mind. The person who teaches you the hardest lessons about your own worth, about your own boundaries, your own perception, they agreed to play that role, and you agreed to receive the teaching. That does not mean that this behavior was acceptable. These are two very separate things. The soul contract framework is not a reason to stay, to excuse harm, or to spiritually bypass what has been genuinely damaging. A lesson can be real, and the vehicle for that lesson can still be something you walk away from. What the soul contract piece offers in this perspective is that you were not a victim of randomness. The dynamic showed up in your life because something in you was ready, not to suffer, but to learn, to develop a capacity that could only be developed through this specific fire. What capacity? Well, that's different for different people. Many empaths, for most of us, it's the capacity to hold compassion without self-erasure, to love without losing ourselves, to see someone's pain clearly and make a sovereign choice about whether to stay in relationship with it. And that is not a small lesson. It's actually one of the most fundamental ones that are available to a soul operating in human form. And when you graduate from it, when you genuinely move through it rather than just leaving the relationship, you do not become someone who loves less. You become someone who loves from a foundation that can actually sustain it. So let me bring this all together. What is the universe actually teaching empaths right now through this dynamic? The higher dimensions have been showing me this consistently lately, that we are at the end of an era of compassion as sacrifice. For a very long time, in spiritual communities especially, there has been an implicit teaching that goes something like this. The more you give, the more you love. The more you endure, the more spiritually advanced you are. Boundaries are resistance. Leaving is giving up. Staying through difficulty is a virtue. That teaching has served some people in some contexts. And it has also been used consciously and unconsciously to keep empaths in dynamics that were actively harming them while calling that harm spiritual growth. The correction that is coming through in channel to me right now is this. Compassion that does not include yourself is not compassion. It is self-abandonment, and you cannot pour from a vessel that you've emptied. The graduation that the universe is asking for from empaths and from the collective right now is into a new understanding of what love actually is. Love that holds space for someone's wound and requires basic dignity in return. Compassion that extends to the self as naturally as it extends to others. And boundaries not as walls, but as the architecture of sustainable connection. This is not a small shift. For many empaths, it requires rewriting something that has been running in you since childhood. The equation of love with sacrifice, of worth with usefulness, of belonging with making yourself smaller. But here is what I know. The empaths who make this shift become something extraordinary. Not less loving, but more. Because the love is no longer conditional on their own erasure. It can actually flow freely because there is a self there to flow from. So again, if you're in the middle of this right now, if you are in the dynamic that is asking you to choose between your perception and someone else's comfort, I want to say this as clearly as I can. Trust yourself. Whatever you felt happened, happened. What you know to be true is true. Your sensitivity is not the problem. Your capacity to love deeply is not the problem. Your willingness to see the best in people is not the problem. The problem is when those gifts are operating without the foundation of self-respect to hold them. Folks, the illusion is lifting for you and for millions of people right now simultaneously. And what is on the other side of that is a generation of empaths who have graduated into their full power, who love from wholeness, who see clearly and choose consciously, who are no longer available for dynamics that require their disappearance as the price of admission. That is what is coming. For you, for me, for all of us. If this message landed with you, please let me know in the comments. Share anything that you're willing to share. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please send it to them. We all need to hear this. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.